No mass protests, no banners stretched across wide boulevards, no fiery declarations from the government. But if you walked into any supermarket in Canada during the spring of 2025, you'd feel a shift in the air. No one is chanting slogans, yet every choice on the shelf echoes like a quiet manifesto. A carton of milk bearing the red maple leaf, a bag of locally grown potatoes, or a shirt woven in Quebec, all quietly replacing the American brands that had dominated for decades. And this isn't just a consumer trend. It's a vote without a ballot box, a war without a single shot fired. From homemakers in Toronto to students in Vancouver, from residents of Montreal to farmers in rural Saskatchewan, Canadians are making a quiet but clear choice: favor made in Canada, turn away from American goods. That choice isn't driven by simple patriotism, but by a deep sense of betrayal, sparked when U.S. President Donald Trump announced a 25% tariff on Canadian imports. It was a blow not just to trade, to trust. A relationship once held up as a model of peaceful cross-border commerce, fractured in a single line of tax code. What stands out most is how Canadians chose to respond. No official retaliation, no inflammatory speeches. Instead, they struck back with silence, and it worked. They kept their wallets at home. Every time someone passed over an American product, it was a quiet affirmation of national dignity. We won't be forced to consume a trust that's been broken. A message louder than any rallying cry. Not because they hate America, but because they refuse to keep nurturing a lopsided relationship where they're treated as the weaker side, the one expected to endure. In the quiet aisles between shelves, there is a powerful shift underway. This isn't a matter of changing tastes, it's a national awakening, a collective decision made without leaders, without coordination, led only by heart and pride. And when a nation turns away together, the consequences won't stop at the checkout counter. You don't need to read complicated economic reports. Just look across the border at the once bustling streets where Canadians flocked to shop each weekend. The malls in Buffalo, the retail stores in Bellingham, the supermarkets in Plattsburgh, all growing emptier. These places, once lively and open late, once favorite stops for families, now sit eerily still, like abandoned train stations. And that's where the quiet tremor begins. Intense, but without a single alarm bell. An economic quake, not born from natural disaster or financial collapse, but from the steadfast choices of everyday people choosing to say no with their wallets. That quiet resistance, seemingly invisible, is sending powerful shockwaves across the border. In just the first 2 months of 2025, more than 35,000 vehicles with Canadian plates stopped showing up at shopping districts near the U.S. border. Roads once packed with weekend traffic now feel strangely empty. The scene isn't loud or chaotic, but it's enough to make the borderland economy shudder. The Walmart in Buffalo, which used to stay open until 10 p.m. to serve the massive crowd from Ontario, now closes 2 hours earlier each day. A Target in Blaine has scrapped all evening shifts due to lack of customers. Souvenir shops that once relied on Canadian foot traffic are quietly flipping their open signs to closed hours ahead of schedule. Streets that used to glow with storefront lights are now dim, lit only by the pale yellow of small shops struggling to hang on. And underneath it all, sales tax revenues in border counties like Erie are already down by tens of millions in just one quarter. No alarms, no protests, but the damage is showing up clearly, in cold, hard numbers. The familiar ting of the POS machine no longer rings out with every card swipe. Shopping centers feel like someone sucked the air right out of them. And Americans working in those service industries are beginning to understand something. It's not war that's taking their livelihood, it's silence. The ripple effects extend beyond retail. The entire ecosystem that relied on Canadian spending is quietly cracking. Roadside motels that were once fully booked on weekends now sit empty, with staff being sent home without pay. Gas stations, auto repair shops, electronics stores, even dental clinics and private medical practices near the border, once frequented by Canadian clients, are all starting to feel the squeeze. Every car that doesn't cross the Rainbow Bridge is a transaction lost, a service not rendered, a bill never printed. You won't hear much about it on the evening news, but those living near the border know something big is happening. And perhaps the scariest part is the silence, because it offers no clues about when it will end. no one knows how long this will last. No one's sure if Canadian shoppers will ever return. And so, not a single store dares to expand, invest, or hire. Confidence has drained from business decisions like blood, quietly leaving a weakening body. Meanwhile, across the border in Canada, the picture couldn't be more different. Amazon Canada is booming with new orders. Domestic chains like Loblaws, Canadian Tire, and Metro are all reporting sharp revenue spikes. Even regions once overwhelmed by American imports are now seeing a revival of local products. Shoppers aren't just buying Canadian out of emotion anymore. It's also convenient, and they've realized they can live just fine without spending money across the border. What started as a personal choice has now grown into a full-blown consumer movement. But perhaps the most important and most concerning impact isn't about money, products, or even statistics. It's about trust. Because if this were just about retail, the losses could be counted and eventually recovered. But if this signals a deeper fracture where Canadians are beginning to question the very foundation of their relationship with the U.S., then it's no longer just a business issue. It's a strategic warning. And it's time we stop and ask ourselves, what is truly at risk here? It's not just revenue, not just cross-border traffic. It's something far more fragile and far more precious in any international relationship: trust. What's shaking now isn't just the revenue stream, it's the emotional foundation of a relationship once thought unbreakable. In international trade, prices can be adjusted, tariffs can be negotiated, and goods can be replaced. But there's one thing that, once damaged, is incredibly hard to restore: trust. And Canada, after countless moments of quiet patience in the face of Washington's unilateral decisions, is now silently saying something it's never dared to say aloud before. We don't trust you anymore. Because trade in today's world is no longer a simple win-win game. One side sells, the other buys, and everyone benefits. Trade has become a vessel for strategic trust, where nations choose to hand over their money, their data, even their future in manufacturing and consumption to another country, with the expectation that the relationship will be respected, equal, and reciprocal. But when Washington imposes a 25% tariff on Canadian goods without explanation, when the White House pushes forward protectionist policies without consulting its neighbor, the first thing stolen isn't revenue. It's the sense of being respected. Canadians don't react with noisy outrage. They don't burn flags, they don't march in the streets, they don't chant anti-American slogans, but they remember. And in the smallest gestures, like choosing a bag of coffee grown in British Columbia over one imported from Seattle, they're making the loudest statement. They no longer believe the U.S. will always treat them fairly. And that, for any nation, is the most alarming part. Because trust isn't something you can fix with a discount or a promotional email. It's not a product that can be included in a trade agreement. Trust is built on history, formed by fair decisions and sustained through mutual understanding. Once it's shaken, no single negotiation can restore it. It may take an entire generation or may never fully return at all. It's no coincidence that experts are calling Canada's consumer reaction a soft rebellion. It breaks no laws, requires no sanctions, but it strangles economic flows with the only weapon ordinary citizens hold: the power to choose. And when consumers choose not to cross the border, not to spend their money in American stores, the ripple effect hits fast, shaking every link in the supply and service chains. From there, a bigger, deeper, and more dangerous question begins to surface. If people have stopped believing, what happens to the institutions, the services, the businesses that rely on that belief? And is what we're witnessing really limited to supermarkets, shops, and gas stations? Or is it pulling down a much larger system behind the scenes? The answer, like a fault line quietly cracking open, lies in places no one expected. Schools, hospitals, logistics firms, insurance companies, even the tech sector. Places that once operated smoothly thanks to the steady rhythm of cross-border commerce are now beginning to feel their foundations tremble. Because supply chains aren't just about goods, they're built on trust that binds each link together. And once that trust breaks, no contract is strong enough to hold them together. Once trust has been fractured, it doesn't just turn consumers away. It quietly but ruthlessly unravels an entire value chain. What's unfolding at the US-Canada border in 2025 is no longer just about supermarkets, gas stations, or shopping malls. It's a chain reaction where every link, even the smallest, is shaken by the sudden freeze of money and movement. The pain is easy to trace as it spreads. A gas station in Plattsburgh, once packed with Canadian cars every weekend, is now operating at just a third of its capacity. An auto repair shop that used to rely on parts from Toronto is scrambling for more expensive alternatives as its northern clientele vanishes. A modest motel south of the Peace Bridge has had to lay off nearly all its staff after room bookings dropped by 60%. What may seem like isolated figures begins to form a clearer picture when seen together, a larger, fragile canvas beginning to crack. Canadian students who once attended private universities in the U.S. are now staying home or heading to Europe. Patients who used to cross the border for premium American healthcare are returning to Canada's domestic system. Even small cross-border businesses, selling everything from electronics and cosmetics to health supplements, are seeing order volumes plummet like never before. Meanwhile, on the other side of the border, Canadian businesses are quietly stepping in to fill the gaps. Amazon Canada is hiring. Canadian Tire is expanding its warehouses. Loblaws is increasing the frequency of shipments from local farms. A new consumer ecosystem is emerging, no longer dependent on its southern neighbor as it once was. This is no longer a symbolic choice. It's becoming a new economic structure. And in this process of redefinition, people are beginning to realize the personal habits we take for granted, what we buy, where we shop, which brand we choose, are in fact the foundation of a vast and complex web of connections. When individual choices shift en masse, the entire economic structure follows. This is no longer just consumer behavior, it's a strategic pivot, driven not by profit, but by emotion and pride. A nation can be firm in its negotiations, it can enforce protectionist policies with confidence, but when those actions touch the dignity of another country's citizens, the consequences don't end in quarterly reports. The damage lies in broken trust, in economic relationships replaced by domestic alternatives, in the quiet but profound separation of communities once as close as family. And so, a deeper question emerges. Is trade truly the neutral ground we've long believed it to be? Can economic transactions ever truly exist outside the realms of national identity, history, pride, and pain? Because what we're witnessing in Canada today, the changing shelves, the idle buses, the silent crossings, reveals a simple but powerful truth. When trade becomes politicized, it's no longer just about prices. It becomes a matter of the human heart. For decades, people believed that trade was neutral ground, where logic outweighed emotion, where low prices trumped everything, where self-interest was the only compass guiding behavior. But in 2025 in Canada, that assumption is crumbling. Because here, in supermarkets stocked wall to wall with goods, consumers are no longer just weighing cost. They're thinking about dignity. They're thinking about fairness. They're thinking about the sting of being cast aside by tweets and executive orders from Washington. That's what many U.S. policymakers seem to have forgotten. No one spends money with just their wallet. They spend with their heart. A tariff policy might be crafted in a spreadsheet, but it lands in the human psyche, where memory, emotion, and pride reside. Canadians haven't reacted with rage, but with retreat. A deep, enduring withdrawal, not just from shopping malls but from the invisible ties that once bound them to America. Washington may believe a few percentage points in tariffs won't change much, but Canadians don't see a number, they see an attitude. Once again, they feel dismissed, just as they did during past trade breakdowns, when pipelines were blocked, when promises made in campaign speeches were quietly shelved, and with each instance, the wound deepens. In 2025, the glass finally overflowed, and once emotion overtakes logic, discounts no longer matter. Canadians don't need a sale, they need respect. They're not avoiding American products because they're too expensive, but because they no longer want to support a relationship built on imbalance. They don't want a friendly neighbor campaign on TV. They want concrete action from those in real positions of power in Washington. Trade, at its core, has never been just about money. It's an arena shaped by history, politics, and collective memory. In every product chosen or left on the shelf, there's a current of emotion. And that emotion can last far longer than any trade agreement. When trust is betrayed, what follows isn't just a dip in consumer demand, it's detachment. An economy can bounce back from a financial crisis, but a relationship that's lost trust brings consequences that stretch across generations. When a child grows up seeing their parents no longer shop in the U.S., when young students watch their country treated like the weaker partner, consumer choices slowly transform into a worldview. And once that mindset takes root across society, it begins to redraw the map of regional trade. And maybe, just maybe, this is the moment the world needs to pause and truly listen, to realize that the little shopping basket in a grocery store doesn't just carry milk, meat, or produce. It carries geopolitical lessons no summit can fully articulate. Because in those seemingly small decisions, we're being reminded of something powerful. That authority doesn't only belong to governments or corporations. It belongs to the consumer, the one who knows when to open their wallet and when to keep it firmly in their pocket. The shopping cart, that seemingly harmless object rolling quietly between supermarket aisles, turns out to carry more geopolitical weight than any diplomatic memorandum ever could. Because inside it, beyond food and household goods, lies memory, trust, and the pride of a nation. Canada didn't choose to retaliate against the U.S. with fiery rhetoric, with military measures, or tit-for-tat decrees. It didn't block pipelines, boycott culture, or close borders. Instead, it chose the quietest, yet most effective form of resistance in the age of globalization, striking back through consumer behavior. A government can renegotiate trade deals, a minister can sign a new memorandum of understanding, but once people change their spending habits out of emotional injury, no one can simply order them to revert. They don't need convincing with data. They need healing through respect. And once that respect has been taken for granted, it doesn't matter if American goods are cheaper, better, or more convenient, they'll still choose local. Because that's how they say we don't need to be treated like second-class customers. Washington can cite any number of reasons for the tariffs: trade balance, job protection, combating the deficit. But to Canadians, it feels like something harder to swallow, that they were never truly seen as equals. And so the shopping cart, which once quietly passed through Walmart, Target, and Macy's, now veers towards Simon's, Loblaws, and local shops. It's no longer just a consumer act, it's an expression of identity. A silent referendum happening every day, every hour, across the country. This story, in the end, isn't just about the U.S. and Canada. It's a wake-up call to any nation that believes trade can be separated from national sentiment, that you can always sell products as long as the price is right, that a consumer market is simply a place to offload surplus inventory without bothering to understand the emotions of the people buying. Because the world has changed. Today's consumers aren't anonymous buyers. They're conscious individuals with memory, with pride, and with a strong sense of national dignity. And in a world where geopolitics no longer lives solely in backroom negotiations or military maps, but spreads into daily choices, the greatest lesson may be this: never underestimate a shopping cart, because it can become the starting point of profound transformation, where a people can reject an unfair relationship, where everyday citizens can redraw the map of trade simply by choosing not to buy. In the end, if Washington or any other government hopes to restore trust, they can't rely solely on policies or apologies. They must learn to treat consumer sentiment as a strategic force. They must understand that in the 21st century, power no longer lies in who writes the rules, but in who's allowed into the shopping cart. And once that cart has been closed, no agreement will be strong enough to reopen it, if trust remains forgotten. Perhaps the deepest reflection this story leaves us with doesn't lie in the declining numbers or the shuttered storefronts, but in the way ordinary people, through quiet and seemingly small actions, can send a message all the way to the heart of power. And what about you? What do you think of this silent boycott spreading across Canada? Can Washington still salvage the trust that's been fractured? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe as we continue uncovering untold geopolitical stories from the perspective of people just like you.